friends, I hope you're all well. Today I'm having a very chilled day and I thought I would do the try a chapter tag for my Netgalley June releases and take you along with me on the journey and see what books I'm most excited for, which ones I want to pick up first, etc. I've been approved for quite a few Netgalley reads recently and I'm excited for them all, but with this try a chapter tag I want to kind of work out which one I'm most drawn to and get some initial thoughts about each of the books. So if you don't know, try a chapter tag is where you read the first chapter of a group of books and you give your initial thoughts about what you thought of the writing style, the characters, how kind of excited you are to keep reading, and the aim being that at the end you continue reading one of the books. So I'll be reading the first chapter of 5 books in this video and giving you my initial thoughts and feelings about them, and then telling you which one I'm most excited to read at the end. So the books that I'm reading in this video, first up we have The Other Black Girl, which is a literary thriller, I believe. And all I really know about this is that it follows black women in publishing, and it's about kind of their experiences and stuff like that. It's getting a lot of hype on Twitter of people who have been early readers and had arcs. So I'm very excited for it. It comes out on the 1st of June. And I'm looking forward to reading it and seeing what I think. There's also 7 Days in June, which I believe is like a love story, but I think it might also have a kind of thriller element to it. I'm not 100% sure. That's one of the ones I was most recently approved for, but I'm looking forward to seeing how I connect with the characters immediately and seeing what I think. And next up we have Mrs. England by Stacey Halls. I have read The Foundling by Stacey Halls and I really liked it at the time. It was a very readable book. It was very kind of compelling and I read it right at the start of the pandemic, so it was the kind of thing that gave me a little bit of escapism right when I needed it. So I'm hoping that Mrs. England will be just as good and just as engrossing. Coming out on the 24th of June is A Faux Love Story. This is a romance novel in which our main characters, there's some kind of element of food. I think one of them runs a restaurant or something, and yeah, it just sounded really good when I heard about it and I saw it on Netgalley and thought, I'm going to request that. And then finally, 29th of June comes out a book called I Belong Here, and this is a non-fiction title about the author who goes on a walk in the countryside and ends up experiencing some racial abuse, and it's about them kind of reclaiming their place in British countrysides. And I think it kind of speaks to how white British countrysides are and how kind of perceived whiteness is associated with British countrysides. So I think that sounds really interesting and I'm curious to see how the author will write about it. So I'm going to start and read these books in order of when they will be published in June, which is the order I spoke about them there. So I will be starting with The Other Black Girl and I look forward to checking back in and letting you know what I thought of it. Okay, so I read the first chapter of The Other Black Girl and it is quite a compelling beginning. It's like a prologue that I read, and the book starts off where our main protagonist joins a train and is trying to escape something, keeps checking around her for other people, and it seems like our main protagonist has been in the press for having spoken out about something, and they speak about how they have had backlash from a lot of colleagues but also from the general public, and a writer who they really admire has said to them, you couldn't just keep quiet, could you? But we don't know what has actually come out in the press, and so it's a very interesting kind of beginning because you're immediately thinking, oh, I want to read on to find out what's going to happen next and what they've spoken out about and what's at the centre of this story. So yeah, definitely one that I would be interested to read on from just that prologue. But I'm going to skip on to the next book, and that is 7 Days in June, and I will check in with you in a little minute. Wow, that was a really quick prologue. So 7 Days in June has a prologue as well, and I just read it. A lot happens and I have absolutely no idea what's going on. So our main character is reflecting on having had a near-death experience while masturbating. She calls it Death by Dildo, so it's a bit of a kind of humorous beginning to the book, and it's kind of setting up this idea that it's a sign that something's about to happen, something's about to maybe go wrong or something like that, and I'm not sure where that is going to go from there, but I think the tone of the book is, so far at least, quite humorous, quite playful, and in the beginning it's really quite readable. So again, that's one that I'm kind of curious to see what on earth is going on in this book and wanting to read a little bit more from. But next I'm changing tune quite completely to Mrs. England, which is a historical fiction. Okay, Mrs. England was an interesting one because I wasn't as immediately grasped by it as I thought I might be. It follows a young woman who has been working as a nurse or a sort of caretaker for a child, and she's been working with his family and looking after this little girl, and really quite adoringly speaks about this little girl. At first I thought it was her own child, but it turns out she's a nurse for this family, and the family is moving to America, and they invite the nurse to come with them, and the nurse says no. And the family is so taken aback. They thought that she would come, you know, we can increase your salary, etc. And the nurse says, no, I can't leave my siblings. And the family again is confused. Why can't you leave your siblings? You know, your parents are still alive. They're not your responsibility. Why can you not do your own thing, kind of thing? And we're kind of left not really sure why, or what's the sort of backstory of the nurse. And I guess it might be a character study of the nurse and their family and their life. So maybe a little bit slower paced than the other two, but still very intriguing. And because we kind of left on this cliffhanger about, you know, what is it about the siblings and what's going on there, I'm curious to read on, but it took me a little bit longer to get to the curious stage than the other two books. So that's interesting. But next up is a faux love story. I'm expecting this to be very, very cute and very sweet, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, I ended up reading 2 chapters of a faux love story because there are 2 points of view, so I thought it would be good to get both points of view and kind of give a real impression of both characters. So it's competing Vietnamese restaurants, and there's a young boy in one restaurant and a young girl in another, and from a young age they used to interact, but their families basically told them, like, we've got a rivalry with them, don't be friends with that person. And so this is them as teenagers, I think, or university age. I'm not exactly sure what age they are, but they're still working in their family restaurant and sort of sizing each other up, sizing up the competition of each of these restaurants. Whatever one restaurant does, the other one copies or tries to better them. And the daughter says, you know, I'm not really sure who's winning, because it is kind of like this competition in which nobody can really win because the other one just tries to outdo them. So it's really, really interesting. It's kind of giving me similar vibes to Hana Carries On, but there are way more descriptions of the food in this one, which I really, really enjoy. And I'm also curious to see how their relationship turns from being like, we don't talk to each other, we're told not to talk to each other, to potentially being a romance, because it is a romance novel, so I am assuming that's where the narrative's going to go. But I'm really, really loving the family dynamics, getting to know all the characters, loving the descriptions of food, and there's also little like snippets of Vietnamese language throughout, from the parents to the children, and so that's really, really interesting as well. Really enjoying this one. I think this is the kind of one that I could see myself continuing immediately. But for now, I'm going to start I Belong Here and let you know my thoughts on the first chapter. Okay, so I read the first chapter of I Belong Here, and it's probably the least gripping of all of them. I misunderstood the racial abuse that the author experiences. It's a memoir, and the racial abuse that the author experiences happens on a train through the north of England, and she then goes on to report this, and the person is convicted of racially aggravated harassment. And so in the start of the book, it's like a prologue, and it kind of explains and sets up that this event happened. It explains sort of exactly what the man says to her, and then she introduces this idea of walking as a way of protest, as a way of reclaiming space. And then during the book, I believe the author is going to take a walk in the north of England as a kind of way of saying, I belong here, I will reclaim this space. And yeah, it's a very interesting kind of idea for a memoir. The kind of walking element of it reminded me of The Electricity of Every Living Thing by Katherine, and that book's about the author going on a kind of journey with themselves, and they're in themselves at the same time as a physical journey. And that's kind of where I'm kind of getting similar vibes about this book. It's a kind of personal journey, but it's also a physical walk and a physical movement. So I think it'll be interesting. I think maybe for me, maybe I'm just not in a non-fiction mood at the moment. I'm very rarely, if ever, picking up non-fiction at the moment. And so it could just be that this is just another non-fiction that I'm not quite gravitating to right now, but it does seem like a really interesting concept, and I'm keen to read it at some point. If I was to rank these in order of what gripped me the most from that first chapter, I would put in 5th place, so at the bottom, I would put I Belong Here. In 4th place, I would put Mrs. England. 3rd place, I'd put 7 Days in June. And then possibly The Other Black Girl, or possibly A Faux Love Story. They're kind of neck and neck for that first place spot. I'll definitely be reading both of those pronto. I'm very excited to read them and they both really intrigue me. So yeah, some really exciting Netgalley titles coming out in June. I'm looking forward to reading them. Let me know what you thought of these books. Which one would appeal to you most? Which one would you be most keen to keep reading if you were in my position? And also, are any of these books that you intend to read yourself? I would love to hear from you and chat to you in the comments below. That's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching and I will see you again next time.